Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Testing.
Check 1, 2.
I see how they feel about us. We have a clicker. Actually, if we could use that in that computer, that would be great.
I don't think mine's got a USB, so I'd have to get an adapter.
So it's not supposed to be like out.
Hello? Hello?
It's fine. Catherine's going to take care of it for us.
Just the right side.
The one that's more worn out.
Yes.
I mean, Catherine, if you just really want to use it, there's an adapter. We're good.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, and thank you for being here. If you're here, you're probably interested in how you can make computer science a graduation requirement. Now I'd also like to welcome everyone who's joining us virtually. Thank you as well. And without further ado, please remember to check in. If you are at a table, you have your scanner there. And I am going to turn it over to Seth Gerson. We have a panel of great people here today to talk us through graduation requirements. So without further ado, welcoming Seth Gerson of the National Governors Association.
Well, thank you, Maggie, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone, depending on your geographic location. Like Maggie said, I'm Seth Gerson, Program Director for K-12 Education at the National Governors Association. And it's great to be with all of you today. I like the excitement from the start. I'm just going to provide a bit of background on how governors approach computer science education and how Governor Hutchinson plans to engage governors on this issue as part of his chair's initiative over the next year or so. First, just a little bit about the National Governors Association. Our membership are the governors in all 50 states and 5 territories, and we support governors primarily by providing a bipartisan, safe space, a safe forum, there we go, a safe forum for governors to connect with each other. to exchange ideas and share promising practices, strategies they're using, challenges they're facing. It's an opportunity for them to share what's working and what's not in their states across party and state lines. And there's a spirit of bipartisanship that infuses all of our work, and that starts with our leadership, which is always a current Republican governor and a current Democratic governor, with our current chair being Governor Asa Hutchinson of Arkansas, and fresh off his re-election this week, our vice chair, Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey. And as you can see on the slide, we've been doing this for a long time. We have a long tradition of doing so. The National Governors Association began in 1908. Back then, Teddy Roosevelt, himself a former governor of New York, was president, and he invited governors from across the country to Washington, D.C. to what we now know as one of his legacy issues on conservation. President Roosevelt knew that if he was going to move forward on this initiative, he would need the support of governors. Well, governors enjoyed meeting so much those 2-3 days, the sharing of best practices, the knowledge that was being built across states. They decided we should really have an organization that regularly brings us together on a bipartisan basis to discuss policy issues. So more than 110 years later, here we are, the National Governors Association. Now, every July, a new NGA chair and vice chair are named, and each year, the NGA chair selects an initiative that can engage and convene a cross-section of bipartisan governors from across the country. Recent NGA chairs initiatives have focused on job training, cybersecurity, energy, healthcare, and infrastructure. And so this year, to the unlikely surprise of probably anyone in this room or online, Governor Hutchinson chose to focus on K-12 computer science education as his chair's initiative over the next year, an issue that I know Anthony will go into deeper in the next few minutes, but as you know, has been a central focus of his 2 terms in office, and that he ran on in both his election in 2014 and his re-election in 2018. Now, governors tend to approach computer science education in 3 ways. First, with a focus on providing a pathway to critical computing occupations, including in the areas of cybersecurity, AI, robotics, and data science. A focus on computer science education as a key to economic growth and competitiveness, innovation, national security, and a strong workforce. Second, governors also approach the issue around the importance of computer science education as a foundational set of skills that all students need to succeed in today's workforce. Things like creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, data analysis, troubleshooting. Third, and Hadi touched on this yesterday in the opening plenary, we've seen the pandemic bring new attention to this issue. Governors have worked throughout the pandemic to close the digital divide, expand broadband and devices, internet access, and connectivity for millions of students, teachers, and families. 90%, and again, Hadi pointed this out, 90% of middle and high school students now have devices, up from 66% pre-pandemic. And just last month, the news magazine Axios was out with a survey that showed that 50% of teachers are more confident in using technology to engage students than before the pandemic. As the Washington Post put it, teachers are finding pandemic tech has changed their jobs forever. So that's a significant change, and it provides a springboard for expanding student access to computer science education and laying a strong foundation for increasing students' overall digital literacy. In terms of the specifics of the timeline for the chair's initiative, since July when Governor Hutchinson became chair and announced the focus of his initiative, NGA has held a roundtable with industry leaders in July, a convening of bipartisan governors in Denver in August, the launch of a new website and resource bank for the initiative on the NGA website, nga.org/computer science, it's on the slide there as well, in September, and a public launch event of the initiative at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in October. From here, we plan to engage governors throughout winter and spring 2022 with a dedicated session on computer science education at our annual winter meeting in January 2022 that typically draws between 40 and 45 governors, and then we'll have regional convenings of governors and their staff in Bentonville, Arkansas in March 2022 and Boston, Massachusetts in May 2022. At the winter meeting, we plan to introduce a draft compact or consensus statement for governors to sign on to, committing to expanding access for computer science education in their states, which will then be unveiled at the summer meeting, using the momentum of the regional convenings to secure signatures and drive governor interest and engagement. And lastly, there are 5 goals of the initiative, all of which are on the NGA site and this slide. Number 1, to increase the number of high schools offering computer science classes. Number 2, to increase the number of governors in the Govs for CS coalition. Right now there's 14 governors, so upping that number. To increase the amount of state funding for computer science education is number 3, upping from the $65 million dedicated last year. Number 4, to increase the number of states requiring at least 1 computer science education credit for high school graduation, main topic of this session, and to increase the diversity, number 5, of students participating in computer science education to address the inequities and gaps in access for girls, students of color, and students with disabilities, among a number of other groups. So luckily we have 2 states with us today that have made progress and are leaders in all of these areas. So I'm going to end there and pass it back to Maggie, Anthony, and Angel to illustrate the strategies that a state can use to reach these goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. And speaking of Arkansas, it's a perfect time to turn it over to Anthony Owen of the Arkansas Department of Education, who will talk a little bit more about their programs.
Okay, thank you, Maggie, and thanks, Seth. And I think I can speak on behalf of the governor's office in this, and just say that we appreciate the amplification that NGA has given to Arkansas's initiative and Governor Hutchinson's passion in this space, using y'all's platform. So thank y'all for doing that. So when we were asked to kind of plan for this session, we were asked to think about what information we would like to share. And you know, over the past day and a half, we've heard from even Hottie yesterday talking about the graduation requirement and some of the apprehension around that requirement. And I think what states need to take away from before they look at doing this is that they really have to think strategically about this. This is not something that if your state is just now getting into the CS education space as an emphasis that y'all should really be focused on, in my opinion. I think that's something that you can have as an end goal, or a goal at some point down the road, but you have to set up the foundation. You have to set up that structure in place. Arkansas, you know, we've been leading the nation since 2015 pretty much in this space because of the work that we've been doing, the meaningful and fast-paced work. And it took us 6 years to look at trying to implement a graduation requirement, even while we were leading. But during those 6 years, we were strategically looking at things like our teachers. How many teachers do you have out there able to teach these courses? There's no reason trying to implement a graduation mandate if you don't have those individuals in place with the skills that they need to reach the students and the communities. The training. It's not just getting teachers certified, because just because someone is certified in a particular subject area, it doesn't mean that they're ready to teach to the level that our students need and our communities need and our industry need. The standards, Arkansas, we've been through 2 full revisions of our computer science standards in the 6 years of this initiative. We had we did our first revision in 2017, we finished our second revision in 2020, and our new courses came online this fall. So we've really given some thought to that with industry partners within the room. We've been very blessed in Arkansas to have adequate funding, and probably more than adequate funding, some people would say. But I think that the funding has went to good use, which is evident in our programs. But the first biennium, the governor was gracious enough to put $5 million of his rainy day funding into the first biennium. We worked to get legislation in place that put 2.5 for the next, each year for the next 4 years. And then most recently, starting with this fiscal year, that budget has been up through our legislative appropriation as a line item to $3.5 million per year. So we continue to see funding support. My CS specialist team, I don't see any of them in here, which I was going to, recognize them, but maybe they've ran away. So. But anyway, they are here. They have on matching shirts to me. We have about half our team here. We have 10 statewide computer science specialists that are part of my team that we have provided training to over half of our certified teachers in Arkansas. So thousands of hours of training, which has grown not only our high school certified teachers from under 50 to right around 600 currently, But we have other trainings that are advanced level. We have K-8 level trainings, including our lead teacher. We've heard a lot about integrating within that K-8 environment. Well, how are you training those teachers? It may not be that they need full certification, but they definitely need some support. And then I would be remiss if I didn't again mention Governor Hutchinson's support. He has went out and visited over 80 schools talking about why computer science is important. He has made personal phone calls to superintendents that he felt like could be doing a better job in their schools in these states. So that leadership has really played a crucial part. And basically, as the slide says, if states try to implement this before that strong foundation is established, what we're seeing that states that try to move too fast, that their implementation is going to fail, or the outcome goals will have to be adjusted to the point that it's really a watered down requirement. And in Arkansas, we feel that our requirement is high level. We do allow AP, CSA, and CSP, and then we have over 50 other courses that will meet this graduation requirement that we've developed internally. I will tell you, AP, CSP, a lot of people, that is a good course. I'll agree with that. But if you look at the rigor of AP CSP compared to our year one courses at a high school in Arkansas, AP CSP is actually lower rigor than anything that we wrote at a high school level. So it is our lowest rigor course that meets this graduation requirement. So, not only must a state have that strong foundation, but you have to have the public support behind it. And that's where Governor Hutchinson's focus on this has been so crucial. We've put ads in theaters going directly to parents. A lot of SEAs rely on trying to send information to schools and then having the schools disseminate that information to their communities. We do that also, but we're also going directly to parents and students talking about the importance of this and the reason that it is good for smaller communities especially and families. Building that positivity around it through maybe it's bonuses for teachers, different competitions that we elevate in stature, awards for students. Our state coding competition for high school, our winning team gets $2,000 each team member and $10,000 to go back to their school's CS program, and we give other awards for different levels. And then we also have a middle school contest. And then strategic partnerships at those middle and lower grade levels, like our partnership with Learning Blade, which really helps us drive awareness of STEM opportunities for students. We may get into this a little bit later, but we see this as an economic driver for Arkansas. It needs to be approached that way. But it can't just be another academic requirement that's placed on schools and students. There has to be a reason behind it. And the reason is that our students are going to need these skills to get into those jobs in the fourth technological revolution or industrial revolution. If you have this foundation in place, if you have these key components in place, then the supporting legislation for the mandate can come. We wanted to do it through legislation, through a representative body. We could have done it through regulation, but we wanted to go to our legislature. Because if we can't convince our legislature, our legislators, that this is good as representatives of our communities, and we did it via regulatory body, then there's going to be more pushback because it is not reflective of the community and what their desires are. So I've shared some links on this slide to our strategic plan. If you're going to think strategically, I invite you to go out and look at our plan. There are actually a couple of states, I think, took our strategic plan, searched for Arkansas, and plug their state name in it. That's fine. We're okay with that. And then really this work couldn't have driven or been driven to where it has been without the work of our two task force. Act 187, which set up our mandate that every high school had to offer a CS course back in 2015, also established our first task force on this. And a lot of their recommendations are what have driven our strategic planning over the past 4 years. In 2020, we brought in a second task force, a governor's level task force on this, and they not only reviewed what we had done from the previous task force recommendations, but then made new recommendations for moving forward. and we looked at those recommendations for our standards revision, our legislation, and really how my office moves forward as we push this initiative. So I'm going to leave you with 2 quotes before I hand it back to Maggie here and Angel. Jack Welch is kind of a hero of mine, just his business-based mindset, and this quote has always kind of spoken to me in our initiative. When launching something new, you have to go for it. Playing not to lose can never be an option, and that fits right in with my team's motto, which is no excuses, only results. And that's what we try to press amongst all our schools. And then this one I always kind of find funny and remind my team of it. If plan A doesn't work, remember the alphabet has 25 more letters. So, Maggie?
Thank you so much, Anthony. And last but certainly not least, Angel Malone here from the South Carolina Department of Education. Angel.
So good morning, good afternoon to everyone here in the audience and online. Thank you for just coming to hear about what has been done thus far. Excited about the work with Anthony, with Arkansas, and Seth with NGA. And I'm just here to kind of close it out to show you what South Carolina has done. I am the Career and Technical Education Director for the State Department of Education, and I'm excited to share with you what South Carolina has done to make that happen. We started out with looking at our vision for career and technical education by ensuring that we prepare students for workforce. And as Anthony has shared, there has to be that North Star or that why for what you're doing so that you can always point towards that. So for us, we want to ensure that students are empowered to understand K through 12, in K through 12 computer science, and also computational thinking. And we think that with that, our mission is that CS is key, that we kindle that fire or that awareness for computer science, that we ensure that we look through the lens of equity, that we are touching all populations, all demographics across our state, because it is vast, and that it requires the input of everyone, of you, of being a part of that and being in partnership. And that is because from the time that you wake up until the time that you go to sleep, you are computing, you are engaging with computer science, whether you want to or not. And we had a joke in our last session. I said, my sister asked me, why don't I have an Apple Watch? And I said, because I don't want to be surveilled. And she said, that is so hypocritical because you have an iPhone and you interact with everything. And so I say that because we need to ensure that we prepare students not only as consumers, but also creators and architects of what engaging with computer science has to offer for our world globally, and that they are competitively advantaged. And so we did that by implementing computer science through various levers. And that is, number one, to create that awareness. So students, parents, all shareholders are knowledgeable of the aspects of computer science as well as the benefits. We also wanted to ensure that we had strategic partnerships with various wraparound services, understanding that it cannot happen within that K-12 realm alone, that it has to happen outside of school, and also providing those on-ramps into post-secondary opportunities and for people who are engaged in getting back into the workforce and need additional education. We also wanted to ensure that we built the infrastructure appropriately for teachers to build their capacity and to have credentialing opportunities. And to make that, as I heard someone say yesterday, as an interstate, not just as a roadmap or a highway, but to ensure there were many opportunities for teachers to be able to get the support that they need. And we're excited about that. We were able to provide credentialing opportunities through work-based learning. So those experts in the field that are coming from industry, we have that opportunity for them to be a part of it and to train our students, as well as our teachers who are already certified, providing opportunities for them to have full computer science certification through testing, or by also a micro-credentialing program that we're piloting this year to ensure that there are those opportunities in all areas across our state, especially those very, very rural ones, that we could have a depth of knowledge in computer science, and it's just not those introductory courses, but those advanced courses that will give our students the greatest competitive advantage. And so we wanted to also make sure that there was legislative backing and funding. So as Anthony said, not just the regulatory piece where we're putting that there for schools to follow, by having that computer science graduation credit, of which we think is very important. And I'll share that with you as well. But also have the legislative backing and funding of the importance of it. And how we did that was by ensuring that we looked at workforce to do that. That's what was important for us. So, and I'm sorry, I'm navigating between this screen and that screen. So, we started out by ensuring that there was a certification process, that we identified that this is something of importance and that teachers had a way to quantify their knowledge by having a certification. We then implemented the K through 8 computer science standards and then followed behind with that the 9 through 12 computer science standards. We have linked in here our strategic plan so you can kind of see what our mindset was. And I think that is very important as you look at broadening the participation and implementing a high school graduation credit. I will say that this is one of the ways. As Hadi said, they're in the wait and see mode to see if this kind of works to have that grad credit. But here's what I know. Computer science is the equalizer for people from all socioeconomic backgrounds. And I understand that with a specific amount of skill set, that a student who is in a place of poverty can literally change the trajectory of their family, not just themselves, but the generation that follows them by being a part of computer science, gaining that skill set, and being able to go on a job, get paid while they continue learning. And so it's very important that we have that as a requirement because, number one, students have to engage with computer science and computational thinking from the time they get up. You know, that child that's 4 years old knows how to say, Alexa, turn on Peppa Pig, right? They know how to do that, right? And so we want to ensure that not only can they engage and be the consumer, but they are also the creators and the architects of it and can change it globally and be competitive. So the bill that we got passed, thankfully, last year was H3612. And one of the things that I am so grateful that it allowed us to do is to employ a CS supervisor, Dominique Sanders, who is in the room, and is also a CS Equity Fellow. We also have the creation of a statewide plan, and I wanted to share this, that this is implemented now for us to create a statewide plan. I wanted to be very transparent to say we didn't have a plan when we started. But we now rank up there with Arkansas so far as broadened participation. And I say that because you need to start wherever you are. Look at what the emphasis is for your state. Look at what your governor is focusing on and align with those things and start wherever you can. We also are hiring 4 regional coaches for computer science. So if you know of any, send them our way so we can get the best out there for implementation across the board for all areas. And then designing career pathways as well as other professional development opportunities. I'm grateful for the partnership that we have with CSTA. We're able to work with our teachers to provide training. Last year we provided training for over 200 teachers. This year it was over 330 teachers. So we're able to grow that by leaps and bounds and get teachers to have endorsements as well as opportunities just to increase their knowledge about computer science and share that with students. And so if I could give you any implementation advice, it would be, first of all, conduct a needs assessment and look at your labor market demand. So I know that there's that issue of, oh goodness, we don't want to focus so much on the workforce, but I think you have to have a why. And we want all of our students to not only be great citizens, but we want them to be responsible enough to be able to take care of themselves and their family. This is the way that we do that to increase that access. And then create awareness with all of the shareholders, looking at the various vantage points and speaking to them from those particular aspects. What I thought was amazing yesterday was the algorithm video for younger students to show them how what you pick online, everyone is cataloging your interest and creating those choices that you can look at. So being able to share those parts of computer science and engaging with students that way. And then building and developing that strategic plan as well as the infrastructure to make it happen. There has to be ease of access with doing that with the user in mind. So I will remind you of this. We have made many steps along the way, had to start over, turn back around, and all these different things. Just go for it. Author is Angel Malone, with the understanding that there's not a perfect plan. It's just you need to start where you are, align yourself, and continue to move. Don't stop. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Angel. That was fantastic. Let's give it up for our panel. So, Angel, Anthony, you both have had really good systems in place. You have a really good foundation. Computer science is clearly important in your states before you actually went for this graduation requirement. So what kind of pushback did you receive? Who was pushing back against making graduation requirement? Was anybody?
Oh, goodness. Well, so everyone who thinks that, especially during the pandemic, we are not doing as well in English and math, right? So this must be the emphasis. And so we did have pushback there so far as what does core instruction look like? What are we taking away from students? And I don't think that it is about taking away from them. It's about sharing with your shareholders the both and, the necessity of integrating computer science into everything. And I'm so excited about the Hour of Code this year where CS is everywhere, so we can show that it's in everything and that regardless of whether we want it to be or not, it's going to be a part of our life and daily routine, and to really share with workforce demand, the workforce demand that we have in our state, and also having residents to understand that we not only want you to be the consumer, we want you to be the creators and the architects. So not only are you defining your journey, but you are also becoming globally competitive to orchestrate what's going to be used nationally.
So, and, I kind of want to piggyback on a little bit of that. Yesterday we heard the comments about that some, and especially in the international panel, and I greatly appreciate the perspective that they brought, but, we heard that there were countries that were worried about these instruction in the core areas not being where they should be, and they needed to correct that before they started focusing on something like CS. My team and I were talking about that last night as we were sitting around in the reception or after the reception, and I made the statement of what are they going to do differently, okay? If they haven't been getting the core instruction correct for the past how many ever decades, what are they changing? And that's really where CS and computing comes in, is that gives our students a relevant reason to learn many of those concepts. We know that computational thinking is a mathematics skill. We know that problem solving is a mathematics skill. We know that all the pieces of a well thought out set of standards for a CS course are going to build upon those skills needed for mathematics, sciences, and even to a certain extent the English language arts and the ability to communicate effectively. So in education, we talk all the time about making education relevant and that it means something to our students. But then when we talk about just focusing on these areas without the application or the reason for it, we're stepping backwards. Now, back to Maggie's question just briefly. She asked about some pushback that we received. And I mean, you're going to get it. As I said this morning when we were kind of discussing some of this stuff, I said in education, any change is always going to receive some sort of pushback from somebody because of those two words that I hate, which are we've always, okay? Don't say we've always to me because you're about to get unloaded on.
That's it.
Okay, so I don't like those words. Those should be curse words in education. But anyway, of course we had pushback. We also had some pushback from legislators as we were trying to work this through the process. And it wasn't negative, but I had one legislator in particular that during one of the committee meetings brought up, well, why computer science? Why should we mandate computer science? Why should it not be construction? Why should it not be welding? And he named off about 3 different things. Well, I was prepared for this, so and in fact, just that morning, I'd found a notice or a press alert of a company that was investing $40 million in 3D printing of houses. And I don't remember the exact statistics, but I had them in front of me at that time. I want to say something like the reduction in construction costs for an average house was like 60% of what it normally was for a house. But I know the reduction in waste was over 95% by 3D printing these houses. So whenever that legislator said, what about construction? Well, guess what? Construction of the future is computer science. Welding of the future is computer science. If you don't believe me, go look at some of those CNC robots that are welding. We have to have those or the industrial robots that are welding. We have to have these skills mixed together. Try to be an auto mechanic today and not understand some computer science. So if we want to bring up a generation of students that are ready for this fourth industrial revolution, there has to be a relevant set or baseline set skills of computer science and computing.
So Seth, division in politics is nothing new, even though it's kind of become more prevalent in the last few years. With 55 different governors, different ideas, different personalities, different parties, why do we expect computer science to be something they should all get behind?
Well, thanks, Maggie. It's a great question. And I think, the first place to start is just to say that this has historically been a bipartisan issue. Governors from both parties have traditionally gotten behind computer science education, and we don't see that changing, just seeing recent efforts. All governors may come at it from different levers of how they want to move forward this work, but at the end of the day, they're all focused on building a strong competitive workforce in their states, and this is one of those issues of how do you create the pathways for that strong workforce. And I think something that both Angel and Anthony brought up and illustrated are the levers that governors use in this area, right? In all of education, but particularly this area. They're using the bully pulpit. They're using their convening powers. They're using their agenda setting powers to raise public awareness, to really sort of drive some of these task forces and mechanisms for bringing stakeholders around the table to move the work forward. Just pointing to a few examples, recent examples, Governor Ivey in Alabama, for instance, created a couple of different task forces, one focused on STEM and one interrelated on computer science education, to bring, again, students and educators and parents and families and K-12 and higher education to the table to set out a vision for what this work could be. She then had annual conferences that brought together some of these stakeholders, and something Anthony mentioned as well, some of these coding competitions to draw students' interests and bring public awareness to what are we talking about when we're talking about computer science education, making it more tangible for the public and parents and families. In New Jersey, Governor Murphy facilitated partnerships with 3 universities to create computer science learning hubs throughout the state. And again, this focus on not only increasing student access to computer science education, but something we've heard throughout this conference, the importance of also having that professional learning for teachers to be able to teach at the same time the content that's so critical for this. In Georgia, Governor Kemp announced a partnership earlier this year between high schools, career and technical education programs, and industry leaders, again, focused on that computing occupations pathway that's so critical for building a strong workforce in their states. And I want to go back to something, and just re-emphasize that it's this new opportunity right now, this inflection point, as Hadi called it, that governors are giving another look at where they can expand computer science education, where they can increase students' digital literacy. There's just been so much investment in the devices, connectivity, access, broadband over this time that its governors looking at not only how to harness that, but how to make sure that students and teachers and families just really make sure that they're using it in a way that's effectively and that really creates the ripple effect for building a competitive workforce in their states.
So I want to go off that point. You mentioned workforce a lot, and it's been brought up a few times today. Is there too much of a focus on work and the workforce when it comes to education, especially in young grades?
Do you want to answer?
Well, I guess I'll start and then
Sure.
and move forward. But I think too many times in education and policy overall, we look at some of the sort of false silos or false dichotomies, and that it doesn't need to be sort of one or the other, but it can be both. And certainly, as I was saying, governors are focused first and foremost on building that strong competitive workforce in their states, and policy certainly works best when there's an alignment, a strong alignment between what workforce needs are and the pathways that education is providing for that in a state. But governors also understand that, to keep students engaged throughout their schooling experience, they must harness student interest, right? This goes back to Ted Sizer's, famous comment around, creating places for learning, but also places for joy. And so if you really, provide students with those experiences and harness their interests, and then always including parents and families, communities at that center so that they're involved and engaged in their child's experience, that's what will drive them towards the pathway that we're talking about for workforce. So it's education and workforce. They're not separated, they're not siloed, and harnessing that interest, then also keeping your guide, as Angel said, on the North Star of workforce gives you the why. And I think it's also worth noting, going back a little historically, we get the question all the time, where's the education governors of today? People hark back to those 80s and 90s times around Governor Hunt of North Carolina, or Governor Riley of South Carolina, Governor Kane of New Jersey, Governor Clinton of Arkansas. And the truth is, right now, in short, all governors are education governors. Back then, it was sort of more of a rare instance for governors to talk about education issues, so it was notable. But now, all governors are focused on education. They may come at it more from a workforce side, they may come at it more from an education side, or more likely both, but all governors are talking about education these days, and it's how they talk about it.
So I'm just going to say ditto what Seth said. It is that both and I know that there's that challenge of individuals who say we focus too much on workforce and what they need in developing that pipeline. We need to make sure that students are balanced. But I think that we have to normalize that computational thinking is natural, and it is something you do from birth until the time you leave. And because of that, we have to ensure that we are allowing students to engage and understand what they are engaging with so that they can understand that it is the cookies that are tracked that determine their choices and all of those different things, but then also empower them to think entrepreneurially as well as being able to go into the workforce in a competitive way so far as becoming, again, the architect or the creators of this information. And so it is that both end of creating that balance for them and making them well-rounded citizens, but it is also about that North Star of how do we fulfill workforce demand. And things such as global logistics right now with your Amazon packages not coming to your house on time or getting the stuff that you need for Christmas. And so it's those practical things that we have to be concerned about, and how do we become globally competitive, and it's through these skill sets that students will be able to do that and navigate onward.
Well, and I think we're kind of all saying the same thing here to a certain extent, but I'll kind of be the bad guy on the stage to a certain extent. Coming from industry prior to getting into education, I have a different view of education in our public education system than a lot of traditional educators. I view public education as an investment. It's an investment in tomorrow's workforce. And whenever we approach policies, when we approach implementation, when we approach where we're putting our priorities, our funding, our resources, if we can't draw a direct return on investment plan based on those interjections or based on those resources, then we really should step back and say, as an educational community, is this where we should be placing our resources? Now, that's not to say I don't value things like the arts. My eldest son is in competitive band. He loves that. He also loves computer science, not just because I tell him he has to, but because he actually loves it. But we need these other things, kind of like Seth alluded to sometimes keep students interested beyond those other things. But that, again, is a workforce reason. That is a reason because we want our kids engaged in school. We want them going to school regularly. We want them to have a reason to not get in trouble and get suspended, which might be that they don't want to get dropped out of competitive band, but they have to be there to learn these other skills. And if we're not looking at education as an investment and the resources we're putting into it as a future investment in our future workforce, why are we doing it?
Thank you all. I want to turn it over to the audience and open it up to questions. So any questions for our wonderful panel?
I'll start with one. Can I just speak loudly? Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll repeat it.
Okay. So my question is around standalone computer science courses versus integrated computer science courses. And so both states, I believe, have that graduation requirement. Within that requirement, does it allow for both, or is it more standalone computer science courses that are required?
So for the people watching at home, does the graduation requirement include integrated computer science courses or standalone computer science courses?
So for the graduation requirement, we have developed over 60 courses, and they are standalone courses, but they're in things like data science, robotics. Our year one courses, when we wrote those in this last iteration, we really looked at what would be all skills that all students who are entering the workforce, if that was the minimum level of computing and computer science skills that they had, what would be that minimum skill set that industry would need. But on the other flip side of this, and we're not talking about this today in this panel, but I'll mention, we also require all of our students to engage in computer science at the K-8 environment, and guess what? It is embedded or integrated throughout our K-8 environment. So we approach it from a both standpoint, but in Arkansas, we do believe that once you get to that high school level, if you've built that integration throughout those K-8 levels properly, then you need to start looking at what are those specialized areas that those students may focus on, whether it be programming, like most computer people think is computer science, or data science, or computer engineering, or robotics, or cybersecurity, or networking. So we've developed 9 state pathways that are centered around those different threads, and artificial intelligence and machine learning. I leave that one out. I forget about it all the time because it's one of our newest ones. But we have pathways of 3 courses that do specialize, and we do require that siloed, if you want to call it, course, but that course is built around competencies that every student should have.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you have to have that definition for computer science, or else your graduation requirement is going to be something that is diluted. And so, yeah, on the K through 8 side, there is that integration to show how it fits with everything. But just as if you're getting direction somewhere, there are multiple ways to get there. Once you get to your specific place, there's a defined path to get to that location. And so the computer science grad courses, there are a range from introduction or introductory courses onto those highly specialized courses that can count with a specific definition. So what does every child need to know when they're going through a particular course? And then what do they need for these specific areas? We have done that and scaled that out. So when that student continues on and increases their depth of knowledge in computer science, they have a specific skill set. I will say selfishly, that is to prepare them for workforce, right? And so it is to ensure that when they leave, they have that competitive advantage. And I think if we're not doing that, then why are we doing what we're doing?
What kind of certification issues have you run into with implementation of graduation requirement? And was that something that was dealt with prior to determining a graduation requirement for your state, or after, or both?
Were there any certification issues you ran into with implementing the graduation requirement before or after?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Angel.
So I was going to say, we did identify a certification area prior to implementing the standards. That was done first. So we had that support in place. However, we couldn't find the teachers that wanted to do what they needed to do, right, to get that certification. It's hard. That test is hard. And so after engaging in that and then seeing the gaps, we then began to create opportunities for endorsement. So not necessarily certification, a full cert, but endorsement to teach the introductory courses, right? With specific training that we identified and provided for, and was able to provide a stipend for teachers to do that as well. In addition, creating those areas and avenues for work-based, those individuals coming from industry to be able to teach courses, and then most recently adding on a micro-credentialing piece as a pilot to show how you can get the certification or the full cert with specialized knowledge in a particular area through demonstration and not necessarily on a test. And as a former teacher, I appreciate when someone can demonstrate by passing a test, but if you can show me that you can teach that to a child, I appreciate that more. That's more beneficial.
And I'm just going to say it really is an ongoing process no matter how strong of a foundation you build. In Arkansas, we did build a strong foundation. I mentioned this in the last session, that one of the first things we did in this initiative is we identified a clear pathway to licensure. Why is it in some states, it's very clear how you become a secondary math teacher, but it automatically gets confusing when we start talking about CS. Why is there not a clear pathway? So we established that in Arkansas early on so teachers could understand. And guess what? We went from under 50 teachers that we could identify with some type of credentialing to teach computer science, which was APCSA back then, to we're right at 600 certified teachers in Arkansas in a period of about 6 years. So it can be done. There has to be support mechanisms in place. There has to be resources there to drive reasoning for that. But there also has to be a clear sequencing for teachers to follow. Teachers want to do this. A lot of teachers want to do this. They just don't want to jump through a lot of hoops that don't have a clearly defined pathway, or they don't see a reason for it. So we've really made that process, I won't say easy in Arkansas. It's not easy, but it is clear.
Any other questions? All right, well, I have another one for you both. Arkansas and South Carolina, 90% of high schools are offering computer science. 92.
Come on, Anthony.
All right, so why a graduation requirement? You already have the vast majority of your schools offering computer science.
Well, I'll kind of turn that back around on a question back to you. Why do we require algebra for a graduation for every student, even though all of our schools are teaching algebra? Okay, it's really it comes down to this idea that at some point in history within each of our states, there was some regulatory or legislative body that said algebra is a critical component for every student to have before they leave our high schools. English, 1, 2, 3, 4, in our state, for example, is a critical component that every student that they must have before they leave high school. At some point, there was some regulatory or legislative body that said, this is important for our future workforce to have. Arkansas said, you know what? We've been doing computer science as an option for 6 years. We built this foundation. It is now time for us as a state, us as a legislative body, or them as a legislative body, and the governor to say, it is our time in history to say this is a critical component or knowledge set that every one of our students should have before they enter in workforce. So, you know, it goes back to, it is a natural progression of what education looks like. I started this by saying the two words that I hate, we've always. In education, we have to stop the we've always. We have to start the what do we need to do.
And so why a CS grad requirement? Thank you, Anthony, because my answer is why not? Why not a CS grad requirement? Because we don't have that option of whether or not we engage with the things that require CS. And so if we don't have that option, then we can't afford for that to be an option for our students who are going to be going into the workforce. So you say why? I say why not?
Typical educators ask us a question, we're going to ask you a question back.
That's it.
All right, and, oh, yes.
So
When should the computer science community lean into requiring computer science for graduation?
So I'm going to say now, but I say that with caution. You have to create the awareness first, right? And I think that in any requirement, there has to be the transition. So you have to have a long runway so that people can feel supported and that you have done what is necessary to build the infrastructure so that you can get there. So the thing is getting there, right? And once you get there, creating another goal to go further. You cannot give directions to a particular place and say drive in your car and go there if you have not provided the roadway or the infrastructure for you to be able to get there. So I think it's about creating the access and then going beyond access to engagement. And before you can do all of that, you must have awareness. So now is the time. I think we're already too late. However, when you are doing that, create that awareness with your shareholders first, and the North Star being workforce.
And I would say, I advise a lot of states on their strategic planning. I think at last count I'm up to like 27 of helping them with their strategic planning for the CS initiative. And I know code.org's perspective on this. They have to look at what can be done, or what should they recommend, what should they put their resources behind in getting states to see equity in computer science, to build that capacity for all. Cameron, my response to that question honestly would be, I don't see that right now the graduation requirement is a foundational piece to computer science. It is a stretch goal. It is something that states should be building to attain in the future at some point if they're not ready for it. So if you look at the 9 policy suggestions for CS, we agree as a community they're all foundational. But why do we have to try to pigeonhole the graduation requirement or these other pieces into 10 suggestions? Why not look at, we have these 9 foundational suggestions that code.org is still going to continue to place a lot of emphasis and support behind, but knowing that we have these, some marketing person can come up with a much better term than I can, but we have these stretch goals that every state should be looking at. Why are we building these foundation pieces? And what can eventually happen?
Yeah.
But I agree with Angel 100%.
Yeah.
Now is the time to start, as a state, thinking about how you're going to get to that down the road.
That's right.
Thank you. So as we wrap up, I'd like to leave everyone with some final thoughts from you all. So what is something, briefly, what is something you've learned? What is something you do differently? Or what is something you wish you knew? Or what is just something you think the group should know? Seth, I'm going to put you on the spot and make you go first.
Okay. Well, I think the main thing, even just coming off of yesterday, that is so critically important and we'll make sure to engage governors on, is I think that international panel, and it comes off something Anthony asked of what should states, as they're thinking about this, not do, and that is to just only focus on the high school piece, but to start in those early grades. I think that report that they were talking about has such relevance as to systems that have tried certain things and what has worked and what has not, and making sure that as governors are moving forward on their work and within their state context, that they're aware of not only what has worked, but what has not in the past.
And to add to that, I'm going to say that, the focus can not only be on the high school aspect, has to be in the K through 8 realm, and it has to be with post-secondary options. For me, as a woman of color, I also would like to see more of a mandate on the diversity in the corporate area. So once these students have the hope and the aspiration and they're empowered to move forward, where do they have to go? Where they're represented and they're able to do what is necessary to be globally competitive.
And I would say something that we've approached this entire building up through is that we place our funding in people, okay, not programs. Now, that's not to say that we don't have great vendor partners. I mentioned Learning Blade earlier. But we take a very close look at how our state dollars are being spent, and we spend that as an investment in people because that builds long-term capacity. that builds a community person who is the champion of that, instead of paying someone a large sum of money to come in and tell you and your people what you should be doing for 3 years, and that funding dries up, or that company gets into something else and they leave the state and they leave this vacuum, and everybody's like, what happened? So place your money in building up your people, building up your teachers, building up specialists. I'm so glad to see that y'all are going to hire 4 CS specialists. Let me know when you get to 10, and don't try to hire any mine away. But put your money into people, and that will be beneficial. I also want to end, because I promised her I'd do it at some point in this conference. I'm usually Team Katie, but today I'm Team Maggie.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate that. I promise it wasn't planned. All right, Seth, Angel, Anthony, thank you all so much for being here today. This was a fantastic insight into what you are all doing in different organizations in different states and different landscapes. And thank you all so much for being here and joining us. Our contact information is on the slide there. Please give a round of applause for our fantastic panelists.
Thank you.
Team Alexis, too.